All right. So this about Rivka and Sarah and Rochel, so now we're up to Leah. So Leah was the daughter of Lavan. She was also Rachel's older twin sister. So yes, they were twins, and yes, she was the older of the two. It was Lavan's decision to switch his daughters of who was going to marry Yaakov. He says that he said to Yaakov, we don't do this in our place. What does that mean? We don't marry off the younger one before the older one. Now, why didn't he just choose to marry Leah off? It's a different question. Why didn't he just choose to marry Leah off? It's a different question.
To somebody else.
Yeah. But
or just tell him the truth.
Or just tell him the truth.
And make it work for 7 years.
Yes, because Lavan was a trickster, and this was how he worked. And it says, the measure says that they were 22 when they married Yaakov. Okay, so Leah is 22. So we learn a few things from this idea that we don't marry off the younger one before the older one. Lavan's being willing to switch his daughters and choosing who's going to marry who first. So when a man has two wives, one of whom is more loved than the other, we cannot make the firstborn of the loved one have the double portion unless he was actually the firstborn. As we see with Leah and Reuven, so Reuven gets the double portion, even though Yaakov might have wanted to give it to Yosef, it was only given later to Yosef because Reuven messed up. But you cannot give the son of the loved wife the double portion if it is not his. Everyone understand that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Two wives also can be representative of the spiritual world, Torah and Tefillah, and the more physical element of the world. Torah and Tefillah are called ahuva because we know that if we want a relationship with Hashem, the way we do that is learning Torah and through Tefillah. While the physical element is represented more by food, and therefore, even though we might want to give the double portion to the firstborn son of the loved wife, we do not, because we need the physical in order to have the spiritual. In other words, the firstborn's double portion is actually physical work. It's not just a spiritual, but he has to work the land. That is his double portion. He gets double amount on the land. So he has to work. It's a physical thing, not just a spiritual thing that because you're the firstborn, you get thing, especially when separated by tribals and land separated by tribe.
Yeah, just to remind ourselves that until maybe 80 years ago, even in the Western world, everybody was high. It was almost everybody.
This is it's from a specific person. I forgot his name in, but I'll tell you afterwards. So Leah was 22 when she married Yaakov. Leah's beauty was considered to be the same as Rachel's, which is, I thought that was, an interesting fact, because we always say that Rochel was considered to be a great beauty and she was considered to be one of the beautiful people, but Leah's beauty was considered to be equal to hers, but it was a very different type of beauty. According to the Emek Davar, Leah's eyes were soft from weeping, and therefore she did not go out and shepherd sheep with Rochel. Do we ever wonder why it was shepherdess? I don't think I stopped to think about it.
She didn't have good eyes.
Her eyes were very soft and weak from all the weeping. And it also says later that okay. According to the Mechtamania, Leah's soft eyes were hidden from us. This is a big thing with Leah, that her deeds were hidden about as much as Rochel hidden. It's much more she's in the tent, she's doing this, she's doing that, but it's not, she's not talked about as much as the other imams up there. She was not as physical as her sister Rochel. She was more in heaven. She was more in the Tefillah world. She was the one who was constantly davening, who was, trying to connect to Rochel that way, while Rochel was out there shepherding sheep. We see that Rochel, who revealed the Kavod Shemayim in the world through physical action, was Yaakov Zivov, and Leah, who revealed the spiritual through her tefillah, was Yisrael Zivov. We discussed earlier this, who we discussed this during Rochel's share, that they were two different halves. The Yaakov needed both of them, but Yaakov needed Rochel as Yaakov, and he needed Leah as Yisrael in order to complete his mission. Okay. The Divrei Emrys brings down the idea that Lavan, who was considered divine whiteness based on his name, Lavan means whiteness. It was divine, had two daughters in order to bring out the spiritual and the physical aspect of serving Hashem. The older daughter, Leah, was considered to have humility and a softness about her, and it's through this humility that one can grow in spiritual pursuits. Basically, the more soft and giving and quiet we are, and more willing to let go of everything, the easier it is to connect to Kadosh Baruch. The more we kind of let go of control and say we understand that we're not in charge of this and not in charge of that, it's kind of like a humility idea.
It's less activity often, not less physical activity,
Yes.
which takes your mind off everything.
Yeah.
She's out in the field with sheep, and then she's like,
Right, but we're going to see that the physical also.
In general, it fires well.
Yes.
When we're super busy, so. Yeah, not so much time to work.
While Rochel, the younger sister, was considered to have Yira, a fear of heaven, because Yira includes all of Bnei Israel in its umbrella. Everyone, it says that all of Bnei Israel has at least some Yira. Some have more, some have less, but everyone under the umbrella of Bnei Israel has Yira. Doesn't matter if they're not from whatever, everyone has something. That little spark, it's considered Yira. There's something there. Okay. And us. Rochel literally, the word Rochel literally means you, a female sheep. Okay. Bnei Israel are compared to sheep. They're considered holy sheep. And being a shepherdess allowed her to bring down the fear from heaven because it's a more physical component of life. Being beneath the kisi, covered all day, being in the sky, being out there watching the sun, the moon, the stars, watering the sheep, making sure they don't get eaten by the wolves. It's constantly on. So there's this, he also brings down this very interesting idea that it's not so clear on, but Leah's eyes were soft because she lacked pride, and therefore she found it easy to cry. Or the Resh and Ayin, as in a spring of water, as in Ain Ayin. He switched the olive and the Ayin in the words, and nothing is something from nothing. So there's a spring of water, and there's basically Leah was able to bring something out of nothing. Was his idea. It's not so clear on what exactly where he was getting that from, but it's the Divrei Emrys.
There's a lot of things in the Mashma Kodesh where they switch.
Yeah, it's just not clear exactly what he was getting at here, but it was an interesting idea, so I brought it out. We know that Rivka and Lavan were in touch after their children were born. And they each had sort of twins, right? Rivka had Esav and Yaakov. Lavan had Rochel and Leah. Rochel and Leah were younger than Esav and Yaakov, and they had agreed in this letter that they were in touch, that the younger would marry the younger, older would marry the older. So Leah was meant to, in theory, marry Esav. Now I asked my husband if there was anything to the idea that Leah should have married Esav in order to help him become a better person. He said that it's not talked about, really. Like there's maybe one person who talks about it a little bit, but it's not really talked about, just that it was a thing. Okay, so Leah went out to the crossroads and asked about Esav. She wanted to know who is this.
She went out where?
To the crossroads, it says. So it means she went out into the town and said, who knows about this man Esav? What can you tell me? She did not hear good things. She was not happy. Leah did. And so therefore she sat at the crossroads and cried and cried and cried and cried until her eyelashes fell out. Her eyes were so tender and weak from all the weeping she did. The Medrash tells us for prayer, she would cry and say, "May it be His will that I fall not to this wicked man."
Did I?
Not fall to this wicked man. Her crying tefillas did the trick, and not only did she not marry Esav, but she married Yaakov before Rochel, which was part of her reward. Her tefillas was that tefillas were answered. the way she wanted to be, and she got to marry Yaakov. Not only did she get to marry Yaakov, she got to marry him first
Can be the mother of the
and
child.
be his mother. Yes. Okay, so how did this all play out? We know that Yaakov and Rochel had signs, they made up, right? So they shouldn't be tricked. And therefore, Rochel gave the signs to Leah, and she answered for Leah. Okay, so we see after this that, after it says that Rochel answered for Leah and she gave her the signs, it says, the pasuk says, it wasn't in the morning that it was behold Leah. Therefore, we understand from this that Yaakov only recognized Leah when it was morning time. This is, of course, where we get the idea of the Bedekin and the corresponding and the wedding, that the cousin should actually see the Kala before the wedding to make sure it is the right person. But here he did not do this. Leah was shielded by a veil. They went to the tent. Rochel laid on the bed and answered for her sister. So no voice, nothing. And he says in the morning to her, he was angry with her. He says, and he rebuked her, saying, "Deceiver, daughter of deceiver, for all night I called you Rochel." He responded, she replied to him, "Is there a teacher without disciples?" She basically said to him, "Didn't you do the same thing to your father? You went to your father pretending to be Asa, and now you're rebuking me? I don't think so. I learned from you." Okay. So therefore, because that Yaakov went and pretended to be Asa, the Avodas Yisrael says that she got to marry Yaakov because he was pretending to be Asa. So therefore, it was only right that she got to marry him. Because Leah responded in kind to Yaakov's rebuke, Yaakov came to hate her. It says that only after that she responded to him did he come to hate her. It only says that afterwards. Okay, he didn't actually hate her, as we'll see later. He just didn't love her as much as he loved her. Okay, so two things really stuck out here for me. One, I actually kind of feel bad for Leah. Like,
Yeah.
she's being called by another name on her wedding night, ladies. Like, she's married to this man of her dreams in theory, right? And he doesn't know who she is. She's being called by her sister's name, and she can't even correct him. She doesn't have a voice here. And number two, this is just some bias ideas here, that before we respond to our husbands, especially in the morning when we're tired and cranky, take a deep breath, have a coffee, and think before you speak, because you don't want to become that hated wife. Not that I did that this morning, but every day's a new day. Okay.
My husband mentioned a few times that he was monkey about this because of Reuben. And like, one of the other kinds of children, like the 9 so there's 9 things that you're supposed to not have in mind, or it's the wrong way to get good children out of this evil, right? It's like 9, but one of them is not having in mind that this person is who you're with.
Right.
So it will not feel like the offspring is going to be the cool color. And when I said it happened, that was his kind of like not telling you who you are.
Yeah, it could be. I mean, that'd be more Ruvain's story than Leah's story, but we do mention Ruvain a little bit in this year later on. Okay, so we see that it says that Hashem saw that Leah was, he didn't open her womb. From here, Chazal says that we learned that she was technically supposed to be barren like the rest of the Imahot, but because she was hated, Hashem opened her womb.
Yeah.
And we also learned that only Hashem saw that she was hated. Leah did not feel that she was hated. She might have felt a little less love than her sister, but Yaakov didn't treat her any differently than he treated Rochel. He did his best to treat them equally, but there was a sort of kindness, softness side to him when it came to Rochel. We can assume, because he loved her. It says that, she felt that he loved Rochel more. According to Chasam Sofer, when we see that Hashem saw that Leah was hated, he said that people might think that she was hated because of the trickery, so she had Reuben. who was proved clearly not the child of a hated mother. Rambam says similarly about Shimon, because Hashem heard that she was hated, her people saying it, not that it was. So it wasn't necessarily that Yaakov hated her, but rather the people thought should be hated. Yeah. Okay, and so this isn't something I had never heard before, but apparently when Melachim heard that Hashem was going to give Leah a child, they protested, but they saw that Zimri, who was from the tribe of Shimon, was going to come from her, the Melachim, and that he would be responsible for the death of 24,000 people. But we learn many times that Hashem does not judge us on our future descendants or even our future actions, but rather on our present. As we see here, and with Ishmael and Hagar in the desert, here you respond to the angel saying, "She is righteous now. I will not withhold children." Okay. There is Midrashim that Yaakov wanted to divorce Leah when he realized that she deceived him. It was not Rochel, but she became the mother of his children, so he could not divorce her. The Lecha Ketov says that because Leah was aggrieved, she was given more than her fair share of sons, so that Yaakov should not divorce her. I would not recommend this course of action to your children or grandchildren, that you take on a husband who does not want you. It does not make for a happy marriage. The Medrash says that Yaakov was angry on Rachel's behalf that Leah had taken her spot. The Medrash also says here that because of this, that she took Rachel's place, she was made fun of by the locals. This is where it goes back. She was what? Made fun of by the locals. This goes back to Hashem hearing that she was hated. The locals were saying that she could not be as righteous as she pretended to be on the outside if she took Rachel's spot. Now, we know that Rochel kind of gave her permission, but from the outside looking in, it does seem a little cruel what Leah did.
Rochel also made it
right.
possible.
I said she gave her implicit permission by giving her the signs, but from the outside looking in, it does, remember, no one else was aware that she gave the signs over, that they had signs even to begin with. Daisy thought that she wasn't as righteous as she appeared. All right. We know this wasn't the case. It was Mishmaim, Shidavan. This was her answer. You get to marry Yaakov. Your tefillos were accepted, and you've been answered. But really, Leah's had a hard life. I mean, she's supposed to marry this man, Asa, who's wild and not very nice. She lives with Lavan, who's a trickster. She lives in a town of people who just don't really respect her, and it hasn't really been smooth sailing for her. So I kind of felt bad for her. It's like, never. Like, she's really not liked. Rochel is liked. Everyone loves Rochel. Like, it just doesn't talk about Rochel the same way as it talks about Leah. Her sister's considered to be an incomparable beauty, even compared to Leah, and they shared the same genes. They were identical twin sisters.
They were identical.
It says that Leah's beauty was the same as Rachel's.
Even if he had
seen her, but I guess you can always tell identical twins apart once you get to know that.
It's true, but
there was apparently a difference in their voice too.
And also their eyes. Remember, Leah's eyes were green. And really, your husband doesn't really like her that much. He's with her because she gives him children and because he's a good person, and she didn't do anything wrong, really. Obviously, it's from Shemayim, but he wanted Rochel. He didn't want Leah. Right? So what she got going for her is her ability to adopt and to give sons to Yaakov. This is it. Like, this is Leah's life. Like, it's not a very nice life, but she gets to be buried with him too. So it works out. All right. So Leah has 4 sons in quick succession: Reuben, Shimon, Levi, and Judah. In fact, it says Leah saw through reporters that Lavan, Melech, and Shalach would descend from her. Leah is not considered to be one of the prophetesses. She's not listed among them. There's different reasons for that. We'll get into it soon. When Leah named Reuben, she thought the reporter's birthright would be taken away from him and given to Yosef.
What's with them today? They're going back and forth.
look at the dirtiest street in the town.
They're cleaning the street.
Okay, so we know that Leah wasn't considered to be a prophetess. So how is it that she had this nebuah regarding Reuben's name? So there's a machlokas among the Drashim, and the Gemara says there were 7 prophetesses. Leah was not listed among those. It was Sarah, Abigail, Hannah, like there's a whole list of them, but Leah's not on there. And there's a measure that says that it was 600,000. 600,000 women who had some form of nebuah. And we can see that really comes into play in the generation of Midbar, that the woman saw more than Yecheskel ever saw. It says there's a measure that says when they got to the Kriyas Yamsuf, the woman saw more than Yecheskel would ever be able to see. So that might be the 600,000, but that's an idea. Or there's no machlokas, and 7 prophecies that are listed had prophecy that was relevant only to future generations, and that's why they're listed as the prophetesses. In regards to Imam specifically, even when they had a prophecy that was relevant to future generations, such as Leah with Reuben, it was only because of who they were married to that they married to have. And so you want to hold by, but those are the answers why she isn't listed. And even more so, Reuben's name to Leah signifies the difference between her firstborn son and Esau. Because in the future, Reuben gives up his birthright to Yosef. It's taken away from him. He doesn't come to hate Yosef. In fact, he goes out of his way to try and rescue Yosef. Just Esau sold his birthright to Yaakov. And he gets angry and wants to kill him for taking the bracha. And he thought it was his, but it wasn't his. He sold it. He sold his birthright. It wasn't his. She says, look at the difference between my son and your older brother. Look at the difference. And even to her father-in-law is basically saying, look at the difference between my son and your son. My son is going to do what's right. With the birth of Yehuda, Leah was the first person to thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Yes, I did not know that she was the first person to actually thank him. But she was, according to the Pesukim, that she thanked Hashem at the birth of Yehuda. Her words when naming Yehuda were, now let me gratefully praise Hashem, for I've been given more than my fair share. She knew that there's supposed to be 12 tribes born, 3 wives, 4 wives. So each should have had 3, but she already now had her 4th one. So she got more than her fair share already. It's an interesting aside here. The same medrash says that each of the 12 tribes, except for Dinah and Yosef, were born with twin sisters. Now, Dinah and Yosef obviously were not born with twin sisters because they were switched, and Yosef ends up marrying Dinah's daughter. And the reason they're born with twin sisters is so that the other tribes should marry the sisters. They shouldn't have to marry Kedanim. Basically, it doesn't really talk about the wives of the 12 tribes so much, except for Judah and Tamar. Okay, so when Leah was pregnant for the 7th time, now number 7, people, she had 7 children. Before this, actually, and this is a different spot, I should have moved it up, but she gave her maidservant to Yaakov. She stopped having children after Yehuda, as a sign of her Yirat Shamayim and the fact that she wanted to be able to give Yaakov children. She gave her maidservant. She didn't have to. She already gave him 4 sons. There was no reason why she should have had to give maidservant, but she did it because she just wanted Yaakov to be the father of 12 tribes.
She did it before Rochel did it?
She, in theory, yes, it's unclear exactly the timing of things.
Okay, but you said they were half sisters?
They were half sisters.
How was that?
To their father, Lavan.
Did he have,
He had a concubine.
okay, and they both came from the same woman?
Yes. Bilhah and Zilpah were sisters, just like Leah and Rochel were sisters. So I'm assuming they were also twins. I haven't looked into them so much. My husband says there isn't so much on them, but I'm hoping that we'll find stuff. We'll have to see what happens. We'll have to wait and see. But basically, out of her Yirat Shamayim and her willingness that Yaakov should be the father of 12 tribes, she gave over her maidservant to be a fully fledged wife to her husband Yaakov. Remember, Yaakov released them from their status and made them wives. They weren't maidservants anymore. They were now wives. They were unless technically they should have had the same respect as Leah and Rochel. You know, no one talks about them the same way. They also gave Yaakov children and were considered full-fledged wives. Right, so anyways, back to Leah.
Mentioned that Yisachar, which was.
I'm gonna get there. I'm gonna get there. That's coming up soon. When Leah was pregnant with the 7th time, she died for Rochel. There's also an idea that I didn't bring out so much that Yaakov and Leah davened for Rochel that she should not have to marry Esau. It's just, it didn't find enough information on it to really bring it out, but there is an idea, it's mentioned that they did do that, and that's why Rochel did not have to marry Esau. She davened the child she should be going to be a girl so that Rochel should not be embarrassed. Okay, because maidservants each already had 2 children, and Rochel had 1 at this point. She had Yosef. She didn't even have Yosef. She didn't have any yet. But if she were to have a girl, she would have even less than the maids than Bill and Zilpah. Leah was supposed to have Yosef, but because she davened to have a girl during the 40 days, or because the bases were switched, depending what you want to think about it, I'll leave it up to you. We see that she had Dinah instead. We see that Leah was sensitive to Rachel's pain many times, and goes back to her davening that Rochel should not have to marry Esav, to her davening that she should have a girl instead of a boy. She was sensitive to her sister. She was aware what her sister was going. We also see Leah's sensitivity when it comes to the incident with Dudayim.
When it comes to.
The incident with the Dudayim, which took place on Shavuos. Reuven went out on the harbor days, as we see from the pasuk. Yemei katzir chatim, to tell us it was Shavuos, same words as it's written in Bruce. Okay. It was the night of the ascension of Yisachar. His descendants would be Talmei HaChavam. Mothers knew this was a Kodesh. Rochel, who thought she was infertile, gave the night to Leah to make sure it would happen. What happened? Rochel thought she was infertile, so she willingly gave up her night with Yaakov in order for Leah to have Yisachar. They saw through some version of Ruach Kodesh that Yisachar was supposed to come about, and she gave up her night to make sure it would happen. This is according to the Chasam Sofer. Okay,
That connected to the Judaim or not?
that is connected to the time because that is the night Yisachar was conceived. The night that Rochel gave up her night was the night she bought the Dudayim from Leah. They switched. They said, Rochel said, "Give me your Dudayim, and you can have my night." Rochel was kind of lonely. She was sad. She didn't have any children bringing her flowers. She had a husband, but he was split between 3 other wives. Like, let's be honest here. Yes, she was the Keresabias, and yes, she was loved, but there's nothing that takes the place of children. And her husband was busy. He was out in the fields. He was out with the sheep. He had 3 other wives. So she wanted some flowers. She wanted to pretty up her house. So she traded her night. It wasn't necessarily the right thing to do, but they
That's what do they, what? It was
Dudayim,
flowers?
they're flowers. They're supposed to make her fertile,
That's it, that's what okay.
but they're
It's not
flowers.
just flower, okay.
Yeah, there was a reason to it, but
It's not a fruit, do they?
they talked about it as they're flowers, thistles, and seeds. It doesn't.
Okay.
It wasn't just because
They were pretty. She wanted the segula that they were supposed to bring, that she would be able to have children.
right.
And yet she gave away the.
But she gave away the night because she had.
That would have been a waste.
She still wasn't fertile,
So
So Rochel traded her night for the flowers. Leah was rewarded with Yisachar. We also see that it says here when it comes to Dudayim that Leah went out to greet Yaakov. There's a ton of explanations on this, so let's see. So according to the Zohar, she did this so that Rochel should not be embarrassed. Rochel wouldn't have to tell Yaakov, and Leah wouldn't have to go into Rachel's tent to get Yaakov. Okay, she said to go into Rachel's tent would be too much. It'd be very unfair to Rachel. She went out to greet him. And so therefore, Rochel did not have to tell Yaakov, no, you're not supposed to be eating tonight. You're supposed to be.
traded you for flowers.
I traded you. Okay. I mean, obviously, she didn't mean Shemayim. We see that they knew that Yisachar was supposed to be born, and Rochel,
His mother was
Leah.
Leah,
Yes,
not
not Rochel.
not Zilpah.
No.
Ah.
Zilpah had, they had Naphtali, Gad, Asher, and Dan between Zilpah and Bilhah. Yisachar and Zebulun come from Leah. The Amag Devar says here that Leah lessened her own honor so that she should not embarrass Rochel. This way Leah stopped Yaakov from going into Rachel's tent to begin with, for she said to herself once she enters Rachel's tent, it's not nice for me to go in. Take him back. Even though Leah was rewarded with Issachar because her tensions here were the Shem Shemaim, and therefore, according to the Divrei Yamim, Gemara and Aaron, this is kind of what you were bringing, that whoever urges her husband to do a mitzvah, especially when it comes to this type of mitzvah, they're rewarded with sons of like which are not even found in Moshe's generation. According to the Yerushalmi, because Hashem saw that her intentions were pure, he was with her that night when she had relations with Yaakov. Okay, we know that Shekhinah dwells the couple, and that's how they have children. The third partner is Hashem. We know that the tribe Yisachar sat and learned this was Leah's reward for encouraging Yaakov. We also see that Leah is punished and criticized for going out to the crossroads.
Right.
Depends who you again. To meet her husband. It was considered a breach of tznius, and therefore Dinah went out to meet Shechem. She was out. She didn't actually go out to meet Shechem, but she was out in the field. She was outside the tent, and therefore she was taken by Shechem. There's a measure also says the reason the symbol of Yisachar is a donkey on his flag is because it was by the donkey's brain that she knew that Yaakov, and he was outside the tents, that he was nearby.
I didn't get it.
Okay, Yisachar's symbol, each of the tribes
Yeah, I
have a
know.
symbol. Okay, Yisachar's symbol is a donkey. Why is it a donkey? Because donkey's brain, when Yaakov approached at the end of the day from shepherding the sheep, he approaches on the donkey, and the donkey's brain, so Leah now knows that Yaakov is nearby.
Okay.
So she goes out to meet him, to greet him, to say, come be with me, not with my sister. Okay, Ramban points out the proof of the mother's holy intentions, even in the Dudayim incident. Why else would Leah give her maidservant to Yaakov? Now, she already had given her maidservant to Yaakov, but the whole idea here is that, again, that Leah's intentions were purely l'shem shamayim. Leah's whole purpose was to bring the tribes into this world. She had 6 boys with the maidservant's children who were considered to be her children, and then she gets to have another 2. Okay, she wanted to bring the tribes into this world. That was her purpose. That's what she felt was her purpose. Okay, so now we're going to go back in time a bit, or actually not back in time. We're going to move forward here. When Yaakov wanted to leave Lavan, Rochel and Leah replied and said to him, do we still have a share in inheritance in our father's house? This is kind of complicated, so bear with me. In other words, why would we want to stay? All his money, all the wealth that Hashem has given him is taken away from our father, belongs to us and our children. Lavan got rich off of Yaakov. Before that, his sheep had been dying. Yaakov came, things turned around. And it's not
Says
Lavan.
they didn't even have a male son or
That's right.
male children.
Yes. It's not Lavan's anymore. It's ours. When Rochel volunteered her money, it was completely voluntary. And therefore, she spoke first. Therefore, Leah can come later and claim that she only gave the money because Rochel did it first.
What
The money,
you
the
talking about?
inheritance, the money that were their fathers that they inherited, they took with them. That was technically Lavan's, their money, their Yerusha, their dowry, whatever
They
you
gave it to who? She gave it to who?
Yaakov. The laws of inheritance and what a husband can use of his wife's money is very complicated, and we chose not to get into it because my husband said he doesn't really understand it, so therefore he couldn't explain it to me, and therefore I cannot explain it to you. Know that the laws are very complicated and how a husband can use his wife's money, and especially in inheritance or something that she works for, is just not simple. And therefore, the whole idea here is that Leah has the right to Marchel because Yaakov took that money and to continue buying his place in Marchel from Asa. Basically, he bought, the Medrash says that Yaakov bought Asa's shares in Marchel with Lavan's money, which would be the money that was taken from Lavan. Obviously, he worked for the money, but the girls also got money. His wives got money. Okay, so therefore, she got to be buried with Yaakov because it wasn't necessarily a voluntary contribution. So since he took that money and bought Marshall, she got to marry. Like I said, it's complicated, and I can't tell you the
It
rules.
wasn't, she didn't want to give him the money? I didn't,
Not necessarily. Rochel spoke first, and
and
we
said, take my money.
take my money. So we see that it's completely voluntary. So then Leah can come later and claim, I only gave you my money. My sister already did. That means she didn't give it voluntarily.
I see.
Whether that's true or not, you could have to go back and ask
Yeah,
Leah.
yeah.
But it's a medrash. Okay. So there's an idea that Yaakov needed to be a combination of both Avram and Yitzchak to reach his completeness. So when we take the gematria of Yaakov plus Rochel and Leah, we get 456. It's the same gematria of Avram and Yitzchak together. Rochel and Leah are equal to 38, Leah is 36, and together they equal to 74. My husband did all this, and
Oh,
he
that's nice, okay.
all right.
Remember that.
Yaakov is 182. Rochel and Leah together equal with Yaakov equal 456. There are 620 letters in the Scripture. When we add Yaakov plus his 4 wives, together we get 620. There are 613 mitzvahs, and each of the 10 commandments has those mitzvahs in them. So what is that extra 7? So this is just my own shot on this because I needed something here. So I like, what is 620 really? Like,
Right.
so 7, I think there's an idea that there's 7 different levels of Shemayim. We're not entirely sure, so we'll leave that aside. But 7 is obviously Shabbat. It's a day of rest for all creation, for Hashem. Is definitely something extra special. Is that? So that's the last 7. Okay.
Go ahead.
It's my own idea.
It's
Take it or leave
nice.
it, but that's where I get 620. Leah, the firstborn, had a little of her father in her, as we see that Leah bas Lavan, and it shows become Lal, Bet Laman Laman, right? Or yes, but you have to change it in order to get the word
Ah.
mixed. Leah bas Lavan,
Okay,
Laman base Laman.
okay.
Switch it around, put base Laman Laman, you get the word
You
mixed.
balal.
Exactly.
Forget the word.
Balal, balal, mixed. Okay.
My Hebrew name was.
It's the same as Lavan ben Basul, which is also again
Oh, well,
Blala, Balo, right? Laman,
Makes sense.
Bez Laman, Laman ben Bez. It's the same idea. And therefore, her son mixed the beds. Leah worried about Asa. It says, Rachot ene Leah, or ene Leah Rachot. Initials Rachot. Initials Aral, which means uncircumcised. We take the first letters of these words. Ene, like the eyes of Leah, Ayin, Laman, Resh. We get Aral, which means uncircumcised. This is cool. Asa was uncircumcised, ladies. When he came out, he was full of blood. He was bloody. His father said it's not safe. They waited, they checked and checked and checked, months, years. Eventually, Yaakov said, we're just going to wait until he's 13. When it came to 13, Asa refused. He was not
really-
circumcised.
where'd you find that?
The Das Zikanim and the Mendrash, and Rav Geller told my husband, who told me.
Okay, you're famous.
The blood wasn't in the right place. It's not clear exactly what was wrong with him, but there was blood all over, and his father said, no, we're not doing this. It doesn't. Okay. Basically, it comes to the idea that those who are uncircumcised tend to be unrefined, more wild, just not as refined and gentle as the Jews tend to be. Okay, we could go with Rav Geller's explanation, which is not as nice, but we're just going to stick with that they're unrefined and not as gentle as we tend to be.
My curiosity.
Yeah.
You can imagine if you're talking about the nations of the world, and it's just they're not as nice. Okay, that's basically the idea. But Rachel was fine for the Dudaim incident, and therefore she did not get to go into Rochel with Yaakov. And we see that Leah plus Yaakov equals 218, which means Reach. The gematria of Reach is also 218, and Reach is fragrance. As in, the Dudaim gave fragrance, which is a pasuk in Shir Shir. All right. So we see that Rachel got punished, but Leah got rewarded. Reuven also got punished here, but that's ruining the story. Leah died when she was 44 years old. She had 22 years with Yaakov. She only lived about another 8 years after her sister, who died when she was 36. You don't really hear anything about Leah's death in the Torah. It's just not there. And according to the Zohar, because Leah stood at the crossroads and left, she don't have to marry Esav, Rochel never davened in this manner. Leah married to be buried with Yaakov. Well, Rochel is buried on the side of the road. It is testimony to Leah's modesty that her deeds are not overly talked about in the Torah. Neither is her death, for even in death she was hidden away modestly. Hence, she was buried in Mars Mopela. Rochel is buried on the side. Obviously, there's different reasons for this as we learn with Rochel, but this is Zohar's explanation for Leah. Leah's life is not easy, ladies, as we discussed earlier, right? She was hated, she was talked about, she was meant to marry the wicked man. Her eyes were soft from weeping. She didn't have the easiest life. She wasn't, she just wasn't as well liked as her sister. Even today, we all talk about Rochel. None of us really talk about Leah, and that's partially because we don't know as much about her. But we see that she really had a lot going for her, and yes, her life was perfect. She overcame it.
Well, you could look at it differently. You could say she had 6 kids. And she had a wonderful
She
time.
actually had 7 kids.
7 kids.
Well, really, she had 13 because they all had twin sisters.
Mhm.
But
She was really busy.
she was busy.
Yeah,
But we know
big
that
time.
she wasn't really so busy raising her children. It really says that Bill raised the children. Rochel was like her bias. Remember, she only lived another 8 years after Rochel. That means Benjamin was 8 years old when Leah died. Like, she wasn't the one raising the children. She just, yes, she had them and she was part of it, but she wasn't, and just doesn't talk about it that way. And Dina gets taken by Shechem. Like, her life was just a little,
She was busy davening.
she was busy davening. Her life was a little messed up. Let's just be good. But she didn't let her life stop her. She, she didn't let the fact that she was marrying Esav stop her from davening. She worked hard to change her divine plan. And even though she didn't feel as loved as Rochel, she persevered and found ways to make her husband love her. She gave him 6 sons. No one else gave him 6 sons, and no one else gave him Yisachar or Yehuda. I mean, this is right. Yisachar is considered even today to be Talmid Chachamim who sit and learn all day compared to
Also, the
Yisachar
offspring of Levi became a
and
Kohen,
Levi, right? They become the Kohanim, priesthood. These are all from Leah. Yehuda is the tribe of kingship, David HaMelech, Shlomo HaMelech. So she had a lot, her descendants were very, very special. Of course, it's also because of Yaakov, but so we learn from Leah, daven. Never stop davening. And to cry. Crying is very helpful when it comes to tefillah. It's not
Unless you
always
lose your eyelashes.
I'm not telling you to lose your eyelashes, but it is helpful to come to tears. It's not always so easy, as we all know, but it is definitely helpful. All right. And sometimes we have to learn what not to do from Leah. Okay. There's a lot of Joshua that yell at Leah for going out to meet her husband, Yaakov, when it comes to Dayim. There are some that speak very harshly about the way she was dressed, even.
The way what?
That she was dressed.
Really?
And she was acting like a harlot, and it's just low naive, and I was a little bit like, I don't know about that.
This was the time when she had the night rather than,
Yeah.
except she was trying to protect Rochel.
Right. Exactly. But it depends who.
That people get punished and rewarded for the same act.
It really just depends how you look at it.
Maybe later on too, but if you get like
Because remember, they are at such a high level that every little detail of their lives is examined very closely. At a much higher level than where ours are not examined so closely because we just
in the
can't.
box, protecting your daughter from the wild man, and on the other hand, you get punished because she could have brought him back to Mutab or something.
So yeah, she, it depends who you read. There are those who say that she did not do it. Even though, yes, she was being sensitive to Rachel's feelings, and yes, she got Yisachar as a reward. She was all L'Shem Shemaim. She did it, really L'Shem Shemaim
Like
here.
nothing cancels out anything else.
But
Right, it's not that's not a cheshbon, it's something cancel out.
No.
I do that with my money. Well, if I save money here, then I can spend money here.
Yeah, we all kind of do that, but in
That's
their
the way that-
lives, it
that's
was
not
much
the-
more,
that's not the
much more
way that
Mujudak,
works.
very, so Leah had lots of empathy. For Rachel, we need to remember to empathize with others, even when they might seem to be in a better situation than us. There's always something going on in their lives that we want to have. Okay, and when we go out, remember, something pleases our husbands, it's important, but we have to make sure that it still fits the standards. And this can be hard for some women out there who, have that struggle naturally, and their husbands, don't see it as a problem. But remember, be careful. We don't want to draw attention to ourselves when we're outside our own. That is Leah's story.
Wow, that was
Very
more than I've ever
nice.
heard about Leah.
You don't hear about it.
I have to just tell you Hashgacha Pratis story